When it comes to Warhammer 40,000, its influences can be pretty easily identified. One of the setting's original creators, Rick Priestley, cites his influences being J.R.R. Tolkien, which can be seen as a massive influence for Warhammer Fantasy, which 40k was then based off of. H.P. Lovecraft gives the setting of 40k its looming sense of dread and the unknown horrors in a far galaxy we cannot apprehend. John Wagner's Judge Dredd, with its dystopian futuristic setting with an authoritarian government, and perhaps the most important influence on the setting as a whole, Frank Herbert's Dune, an epic space opera series that covers the dangers of religion, charismatic leaders, government control, and the nature of mankind's base desires. While some of the influences from Dune can be easily identified, some of them are much more subtle, either by intention or by parallel thinking. So let's look deep into Dune and 40k lore and see what we can find to be considered an influence and what's a direct copy. Hey guys, it's Shane here from Tank Under Benches with Josh.
Hello again.
And today, like I said in the intro, going through what the correlation between 40k and Dune is, and what is directly taken, and what was more just inspiration or parallel thinking. Let's go straight into this list. So we're starting with the non-direct, what could be seen as sort of, like I said, parallel thinking, just same themes.
Honestly, I was thinking this category being a bit larger.
Well,
it's quite a bit, but like it's not almost not as big as the direct inspirations, is it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, most people see 40k as pretty much ripping off Dune entirely. So, but I feel it can be given some leniency there. So let's start with, in no particular order, looking at the Bene Gesserit. Now, they're an organization that sort of plans things ahead. They have some sort of future predicting abilities and such. You can see that very much as well in the Eldar, with the Farseers, and especially in Heresy with the Cabal. Now, the Cabal's whole plan was they predicted this whole future, seeing, Horus falling and everything, and they're putting all these things into motion to ensure what future is going to happen, much like what the Bene Gesserit are doing.
Mm-hmm. And more than that, it's that they don't really explain this process and their idea to anyone. Anyone tries to question them and their motives, they sort of talk down to them like they're children, like they can't possibly understand.
Pretty much. And you see it a lot in even conversations with Eldar themselves, saying, I've seen this path, and they're like, are you sure that's going to happen? Well, it might. Because you have a lot of infighting with the Bene Gesserit, where even they're not sure of each other. They're not, even though they're all one organization, they're not really all on the same length of thinking. Yeah, you see a very big parallel between a Cabal, a Farseer sort of council, and how the Bene Gesserit sort of act.
Yep, they're willing to sacrifice anyone to accomplish their goals, and it doesn't matter how many bodies pile up, that's a sacrifice they're willing to make.
Yeah, exactly. That's our Eldar, and yeah. The next one we're looking at is the use of Latin.
I'd say a loose use of Latin in this case.
Yeah, because of course the Imperium likes to use it a lot. A lot of their words are Imperial High Gothic.
Latin adjacent, Latin inspired.
Yeah, pretty much they've forgotten what Latin sounds like and they're just trying to recreate it for reasons. And you find that in a couple places. The thing with it in Dune, it sounds really out of place. Like the main one we see is Salusa Secundus, which sounds like it's out of it. You have Imperial Secundus in 40k, so it sounds very much a Warhammer thing. So it's only used in a couple places, and yeah, like I said, it sounds out of place in Dune when they use these sort of naming conventions. I'd say 40k can claim that that's their thing, but it is weird that you did see it in some cases in Dune.
Also, there are a few references, but I do agree Warhammer uses it a lot more heavily than Dune does, and I think that's kind of the shtick, that's the vibe that 40k is going for. Yeah,
it's just whether they saw them using it in Dune and said, hey, let's do that for us, or if it's, some sort of parallel thinking. We'll never know. Oh, we will. Maybe we'll just ask someone. Salusa Secundus is also described in the book as a death world. So they coined the phrase sort of first in this sort of instance, but I mean, death world's a pretty loose term. which we see used in 40k a lot. Catachan's a death world. Krieg is a death
A
world.
lot of worlds in 40k.
Yeah, Ferris. Fenris is a death world. It's very hard to live there, so it breeds very elite soldiers. Like, the concept is there first. A death world just to make soldiers.
What was the name of that the plant that grows on Seleucus?
Yeah, so just like in Catachan, where the environment will definitely try and kill you, so sugar wire is also sort of native to Seleucus Secundus, which is razor sharp. It's a plant that's like steel and super sharp, so you can just walk into it and you'll just be shredded. They use it as assassination technique, especially the Honored Motres. They like to use sugar wire a lot. So yeah, just the environment itself is so deadly.
Reminds me of a reference in 40k. I think it's pretty directly taken here, but could be inspiration. There's references to wireweed in 40k.
Oh, there is too. Yes. No, that's a good point. I forgot about the wireweed. I mostly know that from the game.
Gladius, yeah.
Gladius, yeah. You got to clear up the wireweed.
Glass and things.
Like I said, these are loose concepts though, so I can't really say it's been taken, but it's funny. It's in both settings.
Yeah.
And then of course we have the scenes in God Emperor. In the God Emperor, when he's the worm form and he's just by himself and he's reminiscing over the Ixian like technology, he sort of wishes that he sees a path humankind could go down where human and machine are joined. He very much believes the future of mankind is in like cybernetics, man and machine joining together, much like, you know, how the Admech believe that's, you know, the true path the Omnissiah wants for them. So it's a very interesting parallel, but it doesn't go too much of it in God Emperor because he's sort of got his own plan. He knows he's following the golden path, he's got everything set, but he thinks that's what humans should be doing. So it's very interesting seeing him think that way. The next one we see is the element of plasteel. Now, this is mentioned a few times in the original novel. Buildings and such are made of plasteel. It's a common element found in 40k. Plasteel plus concrete. So it's funny, they're both there, but they are a very generic sort of term.
It's your average sci-fi material. Like, you could say that, this armor that you've wrapped your Cadian Kazakhin in is made of plasteel, or the inside of this building is very obviously coated in plasteel. This is a gentle reminder, this is a sci-fi setting.
Pretty much. It's like when you put adamantine in it. Like, was Tolkien the first to invent that? And then you find it in X-Men, you find it in 40k. It's a weird element that just doesn't have one thing it belongs to anymore. It's kind of funny like that. I mean, Dune sort of brought it up first. I have seen references that Harlan Ellison came up with it before then, but I haven't been able to find the book he mentioned it in. He writes a lot of things. That was always Harlan Ellison's things. He went for length of words, just trying to make it as poetic as he could, rather than a sort of shorter, cohesive story. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Next, we're looking at the shortening of words over time. The name of Arrakis, when it goes from God Emperor of Dune, the time skip goes to Heretics of Dune. It's now just called Rakis.
So this is similar to like what happened on Terra during the War of Unification, is that they had references to all these old countries and organizations where the names were a bit off and just generally shorter. Where you had America, I believe was referred to as just America.
Yeah, and a lot of times they speak of like the great playwright Spear, and they're trying to say Shakespeare, but they've just lost the name, and that's what they sort of figure it to be. So both have that sort of idea that names sort of get lost to time. Even though you've been there for so long, it'll just sort of evolve and you'll forget what it evolved from. But yeah, I'm not sure if they had that in mind for 40k when they looked at it happening in Dune. But yeah, that's an interesting one. So we see pilgrimages to Dune in Dune Messiah. Once Paul is considered to be the Kwisatz Haderach, he's in charge. He's basically, who you're going to worship. So the Fremen go out and they convert everyone. Everyone just starts making pilgrimages. They want to come see Dune. It's like the best place to go see. So this happens now in 40k, where people will spend their entire lives on a planet, toiling away, just so they can go to Terra and see the palace.
I mean, the pilgrimage is a pretty big thing in 40k, even in earlier parts leading up to it. The idea is that Terra itself is a planet choked with these pilgrims who have come here to visit the gates of the Golden Palace and now can't really go anywhere because, well, they've lived and died and had children, and those children have had children, and it's been multiple generations of people whose entire culture is just random pilgrims on the street.
Pretty much, and then, yeah, you just end up as a refugee on Terra just to go there because you feel that's where you should be, just to get a glimpse of the Emperor's palace. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny how, yeah, people dedicate their life just going to see this entity that doesn't have any idea who they are or any concern of them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, pilgrimages like this have always been around, so it can be seen that both exist parallel to each other.
Yeah, it's a symbolism thing, like the gathering of power almost.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that one was a direct influence from Dune or not, but we'll see. And the last one we're looking at as the non-direct is the Count Fenrig. Now, not only him, you have some other steersmen that are mentioned in Messiah that are essentially blanks. They cannot be seen with precognition. In the final scene with the Emperor and Paul Atreides, Count Fenrig's there, and Paul's like, I didn't see him being in any of these visions. He wasn't there. He's immune to being seen by precognition sort of forces. So he's like an anomaly. He can't be predicted. And as well as that, he's an assassin. So he's like a blank assassin, which very much we see a lot in 40k with the Calexis assassins. That's kind of neat.
And you can imagine in either civilization, either full swing 40k Imperium or Paul's, I suppose, empire in Dune, is that when you rely so much on these psychic abilities to predict the future, to see threats coming, the one invisible threat suddenly becomes this massive force multiplier. A Calexis assassin breaking apart a council of Eldar seers, they never saw that coming.
Well, that'll learn them. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I'm not sure of blank concept, because it isn't explored much past the first Dune novel and then Messiah. It's you don't bring it up much. People who are unseeable. Yeah, it could have been the influence for blanks. It could have been something else. So yeah, we'll leave it as non-direct for now. But that's all the non-direct. So as I was editing this video, I realized a very important one I completely forgot, and that's the use of las weaponry. Now, las technology in Dune, it's more of like how you see a laser. It's just a solid beam. You see it in the movie. A strong, just laser that just shoots out, kind of like a lightsaber, but, shot from a gun. So it's not very much used because, of course, they interact with shields and then cause a huge explosion. The whole thing is just set up to explain why they don't use guns. Everyone fights hand to hand because it's cool, and everything's more cinematic and it's like dueling and stuff. It's much more personal, like combat in Dune. So that's the reason they sort of got rid of a reason to have lasers in it. So technically, yeah, they both have las weapons and shields, but they function very, very differently. And aside from name, that it's not too much in common. And most sci-fi settings have sort of laser guns, so I don't see las weaponry being in 40k as a very big pullover from Dune. So now we're looking at direct influences, stuff that we know was in Dune, and they said, all right, we're putting this in 40k. So we'll look at House X. Now, the House of X, of course, is your technological sort of planet. So they like to make new technology that they really shouldn't be, because it's been banned to make machines that think. So they tread the line very carefully. And even though the God Emperor Leto, he saw like a lot of the stuff, and they told him, it's like, hey, they shouldn't be making that. And he's like, no, I sort of like it. I think it's important. They're going against the conventions, but I like what they're making, so I'll just let them get away with it. Much like what a lot of AdMech try and do.
Yeah, it's the long-ranging thing that we're seeing here is By the time you're getting deeper into the written story of Dune, House 6 has become steadily more stagnant, steadily less capable of producing any kind of new influence, any new technology. And up until you had Gilliman come back and bring Cole with him, no one in the AdMech had really made anything, any kind of progress or any kind of great technological strides for thousands of years. Similarly, you can compare the almost feudal meritocracy nature of the two bodies. The idea is either you're somebody who's found something, in the case of House X, that's you've discovered a technology that you can now replicate and sell. But in the case of the AdMech, it's finding some kind of STC element that can be reproduced. And if you're one of these individuals, you have power unbounded to live the most easy life you can think of. And if you're not one of them, well, you're just chattel and you can be worked to death quite comfortably.
AdMech is a pretty harsh society. So, yeah, you see that parallel with technology. Just it's like one group that have like all the technology. So that's a pretty direct copy there. Keeping on that same trend, we're looking at the Emperor setting up Mars to have the religion of the Omnissiah, just like the Bene Gesserit did on Dune for the Kwisatz Haderach. So they both had this imprinting of like a religion, of a prophecy, that someone would come and save them and lead them, but it was set up.
In all honesty, it's really quite an ingenious way of doing things. If you need to subjugate a group of people, better they be on their knees by the time you get there.
Yeah, and it's just, they have these plans that are so long in the making. So generations ago, they set this up to happen. So the Emperor knew he would need Mars in the future. By setting this all up, he can get them to believe he is a god, just like they're believing Paul is the savior on Dune, so they can control Dune.
In both cases, he's not a god, he's just a very shiny boy.
Yeah, so that's pretty clear. That's the same thing. So next we're looking at the no ships. So in Dune, they have these things called no ships that are undetectable by prescience and other detecting manners, very stealthy.
Could you say psychic proof, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. Same with no chambers as well, which can't be spied on. Basically, the whole later books, they're just traveling in these no ships because they've got to get back to Dune and they've got to set everything up and they can't be stopped. This is exactly the same as null ships, which, your black sort of spaceships that can't be affected by psychic powers. So, no ships, null ships, and null chambers. It's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's just these basically lead-encased boxes that Superman can't see into. It's that sort of mechanic. But just the fact that the name is so similar, you can obviously see it's just ripped off. Yeah, that one's a pretty easy one. It's not super sort of damaging because it's
normal. You come up with a group of people who are very powerful psychically. The next thing you want to develop is something to stop the psychic powers.
Yeah, I guess so. It's the next progression of the story. So both settings, we also see that there are no thinking machines, there are no computers, because both settings had a war that was against artificial intelligence. You had the Iron Men Rebellion, and you had the Butlerian Jihad. Where both thinking machines, androids, artificial intelligences rose up against man, and we had to fight them back. And the result of that war was we can't have these machines anymore.
Mm-hmm. A similar thing between the two, of course, is there's never a great explanation as to how the squishy, almost subservient to their mechanical caretakers, humans, actually managed to win the war.
Yeah. No, I think it's just sheer numbers, but then again, a machine should be able to self-replicate. So
did someone have some machines that had a preset kill limit?
Oh, maybe. That's a perfect wave after wave. So yeah, the fact that both settings have this almost exact same backstory, and both is sort of vague, and it's good that it's vague, and it's got a good reason. It happened so long ago, no one can sort of remember why, but we know but it has to stay in place.
Yep.
The lack of thinking machines in both settings, that's pretty clear. The next one we're looking at is navigators. Navigators is a direct pull, because the fact is they didn't even change the name. They're both navigators in each settings, are both mutants, and they're both created mutants, and they do the same thing. That's a bit of a lazy one. The fact they didn't even change the name.
No. It's that it's so key to so much of how the setting works, and it's literally your copy and your paste. Just try to make sure the homework doesn't look too similar.
Because they're both technically mutants, but Navigator mutants, they don't really look that different. They're just sort of creepy, void-born looking people.
Don't stare into the third eye.
Well, exactly. Most people are thirsting pretty hard for in Rogue Trader, the Navigator chick in that.
Yeah, they are.
I didn't really get that. It was like, here's my albino girlfriend who has horrible eyes and these really long fingernails and looks like she has dead skin. But you can really riz her up in that game, and that's
concerning.
Yeah. So, but that's definitely still more suitable than the Navigators in Dune.
I'm
Giant
sure there's
fish
someone out there. Someone out there.
Yeah, I'm sure you got your Troy McClure.
No thanks.
Navigators, yeah, that's a direct steal. You stole that directly, so that's fun. So when we look at the Emperor of Mankind, and of course the Worm Emperor of Mankind, pretty much being the same sort of being. I'm speaking about in 40k, when the Emperor is, of course, on his throne. He's the Corpse Emperor. The Corpse Emperor and the Worm Emperor. Both being tyrants, both being unmovable. The majority of people don't actually see him. They just know he's there, and we know he doesn't want you doing almost anything. He will control your life and control what things happen, what you believe, and you just have to deal with it. So they're both larger than humans. And I mean, that's the fallacy. They're both ruling mankind. You can't really call them men anymore, though.
Nope.
And you can't really call them gods either. But they're so removed from being human, but we're still worshipping and doing exactly what they say.
And it resolves in the same interesting situation, is that so much of these settings are based around these characters. If everyone related to them had a bit of a wake-up moment and walked away, they'd have no power whatsoever. They'd just be some kind of weird freak that can't get out much.
And the other weird thing is, both of them are relied on for space travel. Because the Worm Emperor controlled how much spice everyone was getting, so he controlled who could travel in between the stars. And of course, the Emperor of Mankind on his golden throne is powering the Astronomicon, which allows you to go through space. So if that's not a direct rip-off...
It's right there. It's exactly what it says on the tin. And it is constantly striving to answer the question, would you still worship me as your god emperor if I was a worm?
Or a giant corpse. So we have the Space Crusades. Basically, we had the Great Crusade that the Emperor of Mankind did to go out and conquer all the planets and say, you're part of the Imperium, worship this now. But then you had that in Dune Messiah, at the end of June to Dune Messiah, when all the Fremen decided to have their crusade. I won't say the other word. I don't think it's allowed on YouTube. I'm not going to risk that. So they had their crusade where they converted everyone to say, hey, Paul's here, and we all need to worship him now. So convert everyone. So,
and that's the thing, is the same with both of them. Normally a crusade has a target. You go to the place and you conquer it. Historically speaking, in our history, crusade was go to the Middle East, you go to the city of Jerusalem, and you try to hold on to it. This is almost like a reverse crusade, where it's like, you have what you want, now go everywhere else.
Pretty much. It's not really it's in a sense endless. You just have to keep doing it. There is no set target in both cases. Just keep doing it until we can't do it anymore. So yeah, they're both pretty much the same thing. Then of course we look at what a lot of people see as the precursor to Sisters of Battle, which is the Fish Speakers, which is the Worm Emperor's female-only battle force.
Female only, huh?
Yep, because he felt women were more of the nurturing rather than pillaging. If you have a bunch of soldiers and they don't have a war to go do, they'll become privateers, they'll become renegades, they'll just pillage, they'll do all kinds of destructive stuff, because you've made them to be soldiers, you've made them to be warriors. If they're not warring, what are they doing? Whilst the theory here is that women, will not. They're nurturing, they're caring, they will, sort of secure things. They won't go out and do those. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I don't think we're necessarily qualified to say.
I don't think we'll ever find this out.
Nope.
I can't see anyone actually.
She'll leave that treasure buried, leave that landmine unstepped on.
Yeah, no, I think that's for the best. So,
But it does seem a pretty clear copy.
no, exactly, because the Sisters of Battle were, I mean, the Fish Speakers were exactly Sisters of Battle because they worshipped the Emperor, they did everything he said, they believed him, like he could do no fault. They were very much followed orders. So it's, and they were also incredibly dangerous. They did their job extremely efficient. They were very much
Zealous.
they were very much zealot in what their beliefs were. So Sisters of Battle and Fish Speakers, exactly the same. One that I put there, the threat from the outside universe. I'm not sure if I should have put this here or non-direct.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Is that you've established your universe. It is in a state of existence, and now suddenly we've got to spice up the story. Let's bring in an end. Where does the end come from? From the outside, obviously.
Yeah, I guess so, because I guess in early editions of 40k, it's like, hey, we're fighting all this stuff, and it wasn't until the Tyranids came in, we realized sort of the span things were going, and this threat didn't come in till like the last book. Because basically once everyone goes out of the universe, once the Worm Emperor is gone, everyone can spread out deep into the universe and do their own thing again, but then they come back. The scattering ends, and it's very much hinted at that the Honored Motres, they come back because they knew a threat was from the outside of the universe. There was something bigger and more scary than anything in the known universe, so they had to come back.
But this was never really... There was never a book to expand upon this. It was always left as a bit of a vague threat.
None that Frank did. This was supposed to be after Chapter House Dune. He would go more into it, but we never got that book. And Brian sort of went in a different direction. But it's very much hinted that there was an unknown horror. And very much you said a lot in 40k, like beyond the Halo stars. The Halo stars are known to have... It's not chaos out there. It's something unworldly, like horrific, something that corrupts and is so alien and so scary. People don't go belong the Halo stars. That's like the end of the galaxy. So very much you have that. We don't know what's outside the rest, but we know it's bad.
And if you're ever wondering why the Tyranids never get here, it's possibly because there was never a Dune book to cover it.
Yes, they didn't have that to steal from. So next we're looking at the Face Dancer Assassins. So these are created by House Tailaxu. And they are exactly what they sound like. They can change shape, change and assume people's positions. So that's how they trick Paul into going out into the desert. He pretends to be someone else. So we have that in 40k as well with the Calidus Assassins with their polymorphine. So that's pretty clearly... I mean... It's pretty clearly taken, but I mean, a shape-shifting assassin...
Look, a shape-shifting assassin is a really good idea. Pity someone else had it first.
Yeah, and I guess you could say a lot of people had the idea, but, they're both in the... They've already been taking everything from the other source.
Yeah, might as well grab this while we're here.
I'll grab this, Face Dancer as well. So, both settings have this whole league of shape-shifting assassins, so... Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, what happened after the Worm Emperor died? You had the Priesthood of Dune, the Rakian Priesthood. These are exactly the ecclesiarchy. It's a bunch of people who then came over to rule over Dune or Arrakis, and they believed, of course, Leto, as the Worm Emperor, was a god. They believed back to a very superstitious, type of worship. Where they sort of take control with their own ambition, and the priesthood with some of the old fish speaker remnants, basically they are in charge now, and you have to worship the Worm Emperor still, even though he's long gone and was never really a god. He was very powerful, but he wasn't a god.
Yep. But
they now tell you to worship him as if he is one.
And you can see further parallels the further down you look into it. The Rakian priesthood is sat there filled with people who have more ambition than actual belief, really. And you can see that in the ecclesiarchy as well. A great example of this is what was happening on Vrax. one priest suddenly decided he was the be-all, end-all for the Emperor, and that war span out for years, just trying to crack that one planet.
Exactly, and we find that, a lot of conflict then comes back to Dune because of this. And pretty much later in the books, Dune becomes completely irrelevant because they learn how to make spice artificially, and they develop a way of traveling through space that doesn't require it. So, Dune just becomes this sort of political sort of center just because of these people that just sticks around. So, very much we see a parallel there. Next one we'll go through briefly. Because, it only happened once, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank heavens.
Well, actually, it probably happens a lot more for the Dark Eldar.
Oh, but we're not talking about that.
Yeah. So, specifically, this is the Homuncular Bar, which was an Iron Warriors sort of experiment using humans as clone chambers. So they used human women to use as birthing subjects to make more Iron Warriors with horrific effects. And the House of Talaxu, so basically they sort of work out in the books. They was like, hey, how come we never see any Talaxu women around? And when Duncan retains his memories of being rebirthed from the axolotl tanks, he remembers seeing a mass of flesh and, this giant sort of organic, cybernetic creature that he's come out of. And they realize, oh, that's the women of Talaxu. You turn them into these birthing cloning pods. That's what the axolotl tanks are. I'm not sure if that was a direct sort of inspiration for the Homuncular Bar, but it is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. And honestly, the less you look into this, to my mind, the better. It's just a really weird part of both stories. Pretty much.
But let's go on from there to the other similar sort of topic of the clones. So we find in the God Emperor, Duncan is cloned a lot because the Emperor likes to keep him around. Duncan learns about the Emperor, what he's doing as the worm, how he's treating mankind, and eventually he goes against him. Every time Duncan goes against him, the Emperor either rolls on him or kicks him or destroys him, and then he's like, all right, bring me another clone of Duncan. Let's start this again. So Duncan has died more and more times as the Emperor tries to get him on his side. And we see this happen with Ferrus Manus in 40k. His longtime best friend and now demon prince, Fulgrim, keeps trying to clone Ferrus and tries to try again to get him on his side. And every time, Ferrus won't do it and has to be destroyed.
And it never occurred to either the Worm Emperor or to Fulgrim to just not be a punk about the whole thing. Just be nice.
That's it. It's just that incorruptible nature of both characters. And it's not so much maybe that they liked them so much. They definitely did. But it's the fact that they couldn't achieve the brainwashing or the convincing. It was like a slight on them. It was like a failure of them that they have to keep trying to fix, rather than just because of their friendship, how they feel about them. It's more about their own faults. So you see that in both of these sort of stories. So that one's pretty neat. Then we have the astropaths. So in 40k, the way you make an astropath is they're blinded by seeing the light of the Astronomicon. It's such a pure light. They're blinded, but then they're opened up to seeing the warp. They're opened up to seeing things with psychic sight. This happens to Paul in Messiah when he sees the stone burner, and he knows it's going to happen, and he lets himself become blind, and then that shows everyone, but I can still see. So now I have my psychic sight that I'm using instead. So it's very much a parallel.
It's both referencing what's liable to happen if you were to stare directly into the face of the divine. In this instance, it's like, well, you very obviously didn't protect yourself. You either didn't know what was going to happen or this was done deliberately. And for your hubris of daring to look, you are blinded to never see again.
No, exactly. So, we have sort of showing this ability. So yeah, astropaths and Paul's prescience abilities. So that's pretty much it. There was another couple of things I wanted to mention that Dune took from Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things. I'm not sure how true I'm just making this up pretty much. But you notice in the David Lynch Dune with Baron Harkonnen. So Baron Harkonnen represents all 4 Chaos Gods.
Really?
Because he's this is specifically like you can sort of say, you know, he's Zinchian in regular Doom because he has plans within plans within plans. He's all about the scheming. So he's always the scheming, but he's also very bloodthirsty. You know, he always wants the blood. I mean, it's more of
it's a power shtick for him. He gets off on it.
Yeah, as well as Beast Raban. That's very corn of him. But of course he's very much his Slanesh side with the boys.
Again, less said about that, the better in my mind.
Exactly. But also then in the Lynch movie, he's covered in diseases and is bloated and is laughing and he's like a Nurgle demon.
Yeah.
So he's all 4 sort of chaos gods in one.
Can you say bad guy?
Well, exactly. It's just kind of funny. It's like that's nothing to do with 40k, I'm pretty sure, but it's neat how he represents all sides.
Yeah, all this very specific, very clearly cut corruption that's shown exemplified in 40k is just the one guy right there.
Yep. So I thought that was really neat. But yeah, you have to specifically do the Lynch, because that's the only time that he's bloated. Well, he's bloated in both, but he has those diseases that he's carefully nurturing and letting to spread. And the other one I wanted to mention was in the video game, Dune Emperor. Because you have that one scene where the Sardaukar are trying to be convinced to join Ordos, and Ordos say, hey, we've got a clone of the former Emperor. And he's like, come on, you need this guy. He'll be back in place. And he says, well, that's true. Without an emperor, the universe will be chaos. I was like, oh, I see what you did there. That's kind of funny. So I'll have to put that in. So I think that was a subtle hint to 40k. So it's funny how these things sort of build off each other. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's just the start of all the references or if that's all of them.
I get the feeling that this is a very deep hole you could go down into.
Yeah, because I was thinking of doing like an iceberg sort of thing for it, but I didn't know where to put these things on an iceberg. I felt maybe someone else can do that, make an iceberg.
This does feel like tip of the iceberg and maybe the first layer down. If any of you can think of anything that goes a bit deeper in this, or is it something that's a little more subtle and twisted, feel free to drop it in the comments.
Yeah, that's it. Maybe we can redo this, or just maybe print an iceberg JPEG of it at some point and put these all in where they belong. But yeah, that's about it for me. My voice is about giving out, so that's fun. But yeah, let us know what you think. If you got more to say about it, definitely leave in the comments or join the Discord, and we'll go from there. But I hadn't seen anyone really do a video like this, so I thought best to be us. But let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.
Take it easy.